Hello, folks. Welcome back to day two, bright and early in the very dark Pacific Northwest. And we welcome you back. We had a fantastic day yesterday, as some of you can attest to. And we want to get rolling today. Let me read off our sponsors for Gift-a-Palooza 2022, and then I'll introduce Jim, and away we go. So our sponsors are Amy Esterson, is an educator, college advisor, and her passion is working with so-called stubborn, passionate, sensitive, and intuitive souls towards their personal and professional goals. She is at leadwithtalents.com. Be sure to tune in because Amy will be presenting tomorrow at 4:30 p.m. Eastern. The Amen Group provides comprehensive psychological services, including assessment and evaluation, consultations, consulting and therapy for children, adolescents, and their families. We also provide parent and educational consultations for gifted 2E children and homeschoolers. Visit our website for more information at theamengroup.com. Royal Fireworks Press. Since 1977, Royal Fireworks Press has been publishing beautiful, intellectually stimulating, creative, and award-winning homeschool curricula and books for children. They know that children are able to learn far more than traditional educators often expect them to, especially if they have the right materials. While originally founded to serve gifted children, their curricula are beloved by all children of all learning styles and abilities. Children with dyslexia and other visual processing disorders and 2E children are given special consideration. Their award-winning MCT language arts curriculum, Western philosophy curriculum, and Latin language curriculum are just a few of the fun, rigorous, and exciting materials they offer for children at every age and ability. They also have a growing array of courses in their online learning community, which features unique courses like architect and space biology. Check them out at rfwp.com. So without further ado, let me introduce to you Dr. Jim Delisle, and he will be talking about learning to excel, meeting the intellectual and emotional needs of gifted children and teens. Thanks so much, Jim, for being with us, and take it away, and I'll see you in a bit.
All right, thanks, Mike. Welcome, everyone, wherever you are. Mike and I are in different Washingtons. He's in Washington State, and today I'm in Washington, D.C. My wife and I live in two places, South Carolina and in Washington, D.C., and today happens to be the Washington place. I think we're one of the few East Coast cities that hasn't been hit by this terrible winter storm that's going through. So it's, even though it's cloudy and gloomy, just much like it is in Washington State at this time, it's still a beautiful place to be. Anyway, thanks for being here and for listening this morning, whether it's live or whether you're listening as a recording some other time other than February 4th. And for those of you who don't know my work, I've been doing work in the field of gifted child education for 42 years as everything from a professor, an author, a dad, now a grandparent, a teacher. And much of what I want to speak with you about today comes from my work working directly with gifted adolescents, especially middle school, but also some high school. Over these past, as I said, 4 decades, I've seen the kids I taught when they were 12 grow up to become adults who are school psychologists working with gifted kids. Others are physicians, others are poets. It's a whole range, and of all of the things I've done in my career, whether it's at the university level, where I was for 25 years, or consulting in Saudi Arabia, or whatever it happened to be, I find the most impact that I've ever had in my career comes from the kids I work with directly. And so that's really what I want to talk to you about today, is to bring to you the lessons I've learned from the kids I've served as a teacher, as a counselor, and again, as a dad and other roles as well. There'll be some talk about neurodiversity in here. However, the whole presentation is devoted more to the social and emotional needs of gifted kids, including those who would call twice exceptional or having neurodiverse issues. Up until last June, I was still teaching part-time at a high school for gifted children or gifted teenagers in South Carolina. And still the only student I'm still in contact with on a regular basis is one of my kids who just found out that he's on the autism spectrum as a 9th grader. because his mom wanted to keep it from him. And he knew there was something different about him, but it wasn't until he read something in one of my books about, at the time it was called Twice Exceptionality, that he realized this was him. And it was eye-opening in a positive way for this young man. And we're still in touch, even though I'm not teaching there anymore. When I do visit on a regular basis, on a monthly basis, this young guy and I have lunch together, just talk about life in general. But anyway, let me get into the session. I know I'll save about 15 minutes at the end for any questions you might have. And as we go through the session today, or as I go through the session, if we were in person, I'd stop and ask you to give me some input as to what you're learning, what you hear the kids saying. We'll save that till the end. So if you do have some thoughts about what I've said early in the presentation, just jot them down so it jogs your memory as we get towards the end of the session. Okay. And I titled this Learning to Exhale. And the reason I did that is, again, going back to the high school where I taught for the past 10 years on a part-time basis. It's a high school for highly gifted kids. It's a public school in South Carolina in Horry County called Scholars Academy. And so we have about 3,000 eighth graders in the county, and everything there is county-based when it comes to education. So with about 3,000 eighth graders, and we select about 50 of them to come, or they're invited to attend our school, which is a normally functioning high school. It's located on a college campus, and starting in ninth grade, the kids take both AP classes and honors classes, as well as college classes, starting in second semester of ninth grade. And being on a college campus, it's, mobility is quite easy. So by the time the kids graduate from high school, they actually have between 50 and 80 college credits, all paid for by this cooperative agreement we have with the university. And the kids go on to do absolutely miraculous things. It's a high pressure high school, as you can imagine, because most of these kids are used to being the smartest kid in their school, or at least the smartest kid in their class. And all of a sudden they come to a place where everyone is the smartest kid. And that's a whole new ball of wax for a lot of these kids. I did go in, I say I, even though it's not in the present anymore, but I would go in every month and work with the ninth graders. And I like to say what I was there to do was to reinflate their emotional tires. Because a lot of times they felt deflated if they got a B, or if they didn't do something perfectly, or if they said something a little inappropriate that other kids picked up on, or some whatever, they would feel devastated. So I was there to, as I say, reinflate their emotional tires and let them know that life goes on. So I asked the kids one day, early in the year, this was maybe 4 or 5 years ago, if they felt any differently walking into Scholars Academy as ninth graders than they did when they walked into their middle school the year before. And one of the young ladies said that when she walks into our school, she exhales. She says, I can exhale when I walk in here. And just do that now for a second. Well, inhale first, and then exhale. Doesn't it feel right? Doesn't it feel good? When we do meditation, the first thing we do is to take deep breaths. It puts us in a different mood. It puts us in a different place. And that's what the school does for these kids, where it's finally a place where they can be who they are intellectually, socially, in any other way, and not be ridiculed for it. So let me start with that premise that these kids all just want to belong as much as any other kid does, by introducing you to a few students of mine that I've met and some that I've just heard of from other educators. But prior to that, I like to start with a cartoon. I've used it for years, and I'll probably never give it up because it's really good. Here it goes. There's two kids walking home from school one day, and one says to the other, it was sad. I never saw anyone break down and cry in math class before. Well, I said, he's from another school, and I suppose he was frustrated. He should realize that math is something you can't learn overnight. I know. Maybe he ought to consider teaching another subject. Now, I love sharing this cartoon because when I first entered the field of gifted child education, I came in from the field of special ed for kids with disabilities, the kids who were labeled as behavior disordered, emotionally disturbed, learning disabled, you name it, the whole alphabet of letters that we get. And so I thought going from that field, which was quite difficult and quite challenging, into the field of gifted would be a cakewalk. I mean, these are smart kids, they'll be easy. And then I find out it's not. And as I used to say to my college students, if you think teaching gifted kids is easy, you're doing it wrong. because they have as many needs and as many needs for support, emotional and otherwise, as any other kid you've ever met. Gifted is a part of special education. I have long believed that. And in about half the states, gifted is actually encoded, if you will, in the state regulations under special ed. I think they all should be there because we've gotten so far away from talking about gifted children. We now talk about gifted curriculum. There is no such thing. It's the child who's gifted, not the curriculum. And I think we find that that's a better mix if children who are identified as gifted are placed in a special education block, if you will. Okay, especially with neurodiverse kids, that makes absolutely even more sense. All right, well, I'm going to give you a quiz for a second. And this is a quiz I used to give to my 7th graders, 9th graders, every grade that I taught. The first day I would meet with them. All right. And it's an easy quiz, but you will get it wrong. I can almost guarantee that. And as odd as it's going to be, I'm going to ask you to out loud answer the quiz by just answering and adding up the following numbers out loud. All right. Don't write anything down. And I'm just going to ask you to say the number that you see on the screen, which is 1,000. So say it. Mm-hmm. And then the next number is, say it's 20. You will then say 1,020. All right. Got it? And do it out loud. I know it's going to look silly, but just do it. So say the number you see on the screen. And now keep adding. Keep adding out loud. What'd you get? I bet many of you said 5,000. And you'd be all wrong because the answer is 4,100. And I even have signs to prove it. Right? 5,000, yeah, you can see it, 4,100. Anyway, everyone I know when I do this, 90% of the people say 5,000. Even though that's the wrong answer, it's a convenient wrong answer because everything else ended kind of in, easily understandable numbers like 4,100. I mean, whatever it is. 5,000 was a much easier number to remember, even though it's wrong, than 4,100, which is right. And you all probably did great down to here when you said 4,090. But 4,090 and 10 is not 5,000, is it? When you take a closer look, it's 4,100. And what I would say to my kids is sometime, you're all identified as gifted. You're all, 12 years old. You all go to the same school. You live in the same town, whatever. You're all identified as gifted. There's a lot of things I can take for granted that I know about you because of where you are. But every one of you, even though you've all been identified as gifted, has something different, something unique, something special, if you want, that the others don't have. Or you have it in abundance and others may not. And for me to find that, I'm going to have to take a look at something that looks really easy, like this quiz, and take a closer look. So my goal with my students has always been to find what makes them a 4,100 and not a 5,000. Something that looks really easy could be wrong when you unless you look at it in a more precise way. All right, so I hope that kind of analogy of what it looks like to be a 4,100 in a 5,000 world kind of fits, because a lot of the kids I've met, and again, neurodiverse especially, fit into that 4,100 mold, where something about them is so unique, so different, but others may not see it as an asset. They may not see it at all, as a matter of fact. So let's get going with some of the kids I said that I've met, either in person or through their parents or teachers. And the first one is this. He's 5 years old. His name is Damien from California. And his mom sent me this. When he was 5, he was getting homework, which should be outlawed, but he was getting homework as a 5-year-old, and he's refusing to do it. He's supposed to copy his J's one after the other. He is not a fan of copying J's. Damien goes home, though, and does this instead. And if you know Roman numerals, you can see that he's added, subtracted, and multiplied them correctly. He's 5, and I'm asking him to do this, and he's saying, no, thank you, because he's doing this instead. If he's not doing his homework, copying his J's when he's 5, and nothing changes in curriculum, trust me, by 7th grade, he's really not going to be doing his homework at all. We often ask for how do you identify gifted kids, again, especially those who are neurodiverse and have maybe a very different profile. How do you identify them? Sometimes it's by the work they do. Sometimes it's by what they share with you that other kids their age don't share yet, okay? The next one I have is from a 6-year-old. And this is from his teachers. I actually worked with his teacher. And on the first day of first grade, she gave the kids the sheet that I'm showing you that was blank. This is what I do well in school. And the kids were to draw a picture of everything they like to do well. And here's what Jake wrote: what I do well in school, everything. I know, says Jake. And what does this teacher say? Stop interrupting. The next part, she asks, what would you like to do better? And Jake's response is this: nothing. I don't need help, Jake says, as his teacher smiles under an umbrella and says, you need help. Look at those rain clouds and lightning, and it looks like snowballs falling down. But a psychologist would have a field day looking and analyzing this. But all Jake said was, I don't need to learn anything because, as he said down below, was his teacher wrote, I never tried anything I can't do. Now, how many of your kids, whether in school or at home, fit this as well? They never tried anything that didn't happen right the first time. Some of those ninth graders I talked about that I taught for the past 10 years had never had a grade lower than A when they came to our school. It came to ninth grade. That's a sin. That to me, that says there's absolutely no challenge in much of what they did. And they didn't earn those A's. They just got those A's. And it may have started with something as simple as the 6-year-old saying, this is what I could do better. Nothing, because everything came easily to me. The next one, I'm not going to tell the grade right now. I'm just going to show you what this young guy wrote. He was keeping a journal, as his teachers directed him to do. And this was the first day. I'll just read that chapter 1. He said this is Noah. School is so difficult for a kid like me. I wish I were a grown-up now, because grown-ups are allowed to drive cars, which I like. But I'm lost in thought. How am I going to afford a car and a house? How am I? How am I? How am I? How am I going to get a job? It looks hopeless. Help me, help me, help me. How am I going to pay my financial tax? Aha. Why didn't I think of this before? I'll let my mom and dad help me, the end. And he goes on for the second day, kind of perseverating on what he wrote the first day. But nonetheless, he's pretty involved with what he wants to learn about finances and economy and the economy. But what grade is he in when he wrote this? And again, if we were in person, I'd ask you to say, and most people say second, fourth, sometimes even fifth. The real answer is first. Noah wrote this as a first grader. And it may read well there, but when you see it in his little chicken scratch writing, including the use of parentheses, which college students don't even know how to use, right? He means it. He's 6 years old. What do you do if you're a first grade teacher and this is what your sixth grade student, your first grade student turns in, when all the other kids are writing maybe one sentence, if it's a sentence, and not even using punctuation correctly, like question marks? Where do you go with this? What do you do with it? Actually, the teacher in this case remembered a kid she had a couple of years earlier who had similar abilities and interests. And so she connected the first grader and the third grader, and they did a project together on economics. Fine, great. The thing is, she was able to connect two kids who had a lot more in common that this kid had, at least in terms of academics, with a lot of his first grade colleagues. And just one more. This is from a 7-year-old girl from Virginia, and her mom gave me this, and I met the daughter as well. But the background is this: the girl had taken she had just received a bad grade in handwriting. In her December handwriting, she didn't do well, and she felt awful about that. So she wanted to write a note of apology to her teacher, and this is the note that Maya wrote: Mrs. Snyder, I'm very sorry I didn't do much in my December handwriting. I have large regrets still inside me that are unfulfilled and that I am sad about. I should have done it while I had the chance, but oh, what have I done? Huge problems are coming my way. How can I pay for college with a grade like that? Never will, possibly. I might not graduate the high school. I would be begging for scraps instead of going to college. I wish I had done my handwriting. I will improve by doing my handwriting, and not just one page. I will do each and everything, including the labels. I shall work and work until my hands get sore and throb like my heartbeat. I shall not refuse to work, even if my hands hurt. I shall never, 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 never quit. I shall not retreat. My life has been miserable since you gave me my handwriting today. I shall change that. I will do my handwriting with great dreams. And apologetically yours, Maya, who's 7. Okay. First of all, I think her handwriting is pretty okay for a second grader. I asked the mom one thing, well, two things. The first thing I asked mom was, does your daughter understand sarcasm? And mom said, no, this is exactly what she's feeling. She is not trying to be sarcastic about it at all. Second thing I asked was, how did the teacher respond? And the teacher didn't respond at all. I don't know how you don't respond to something this profound. We might laugh when we read it, but there's a profundity to this that means this kid wants to be taken seriously. And sadly, on the part of her teacher, I don't think she was. So these are just some indications from very young children. I'm not saying this identifies them as gifted, but it certainly gives you some clues that they may be sending signs to us that we need to remember. We need to write down if we're parents. We need to share these with school personnel, just so they see the child that we see at home. They may not always show this in school, but they may show it wherever they show it, whether it's school, whether it's in extracurriculars, whatever it is they're doing. We need to collect these to not randomize them. Because if you go into school and the principal says, oh, everyone thinks their kids are gifted, maybe you have some evidence that shows that this kid is learning things at a different level than most kids his or her age. And I just want to share one more. It's not going to have a visual, but this is also a young girl, a young woman, a 14-year-old. And I was giving a talk years ago in New York. And instead of having, it was a state conference or something, and instead of having an adult introduce me, like Mike just introduced me, they had a student do it. And they had a 14-year-old girl named Christine. And so she got up to the podium, and instead of just saying, hello, this is Dr. Delisle who's going to talk to you today, she decided to give a little talk. And it went on for quite a long time. I'm not going to share the whole talk, but I want to share a few minutes of it with you. Again, she's 14 years old. Her name is Christine. Here's how she started. Good morning. My name is Christine, and I am highly gifted. I don't normally go around telling people or wearing a badge that identifies me as such. However, for the purposes of this talk, I thought I'd better be straight with you. Let's see. The thought did cross my mind to write profoundly on the topic of giftedness, but then I quickly dismissed it. I'm trying to cut down on the number of deep and meaningful thoughts I have before breakfast. Instead, here is a spontaneous response to the topic that I will share with you as a series of questions arising from my own experience. First, why is giftedness linked to achievement? That is, what I can or cannot do instead of what and how I feel. Next, why can't adults readily accept that a 4-year-old can have profound thoughts and breakdowns, and to think seriously about suicide when I'm 7 doesn't necessarily mean I'm depressed. Rather, I'm considering all my options. Isn't it frustrating that the majority of teachers appear to be extroverts with no real understanding of the meaning of introversion or the needs of introverts? How hard would it be for schools to allow open access to quiet places to people like me who find being around other people draining and need a quiet time to reflect? On the topic of achievement, if I live a responsible life where I take care of myself and live in harmony with my fellow human beings and the environment, isn't that achievement? Why do you ask me questions if you're not prepared to listen, to wait for and then consider my answers? Have you noticed that adults expect kids to wear the label gifted when they won't? Have you watched adults squirm and listen to their responses when you ask them if they're gifted? What does this say about how they define giftedness? And what messages does this send to people, especially kids like me, about giftedness being okay? And lastly, how come parents and teachers persist in their belief that my school underachievement will be reversed by taking away my passions or interests, or by holding them to ransom, and then they seem surprised when I lose the will to cooperate? And then Christine sat down. That's about a third of what she said. And then I had to get up and speak. All I wanted to say was what she said, because didn't she say it all? And she did it in the form of questions. She wasn't yelling at us. She was asking for help. The power in her words, the power in her feelings, I think comes across more than anything else I've shared with you today. And it accentuates my belief that giftedness is more than just what you do. In fact, according to my favorite advocate for gifted, Anna Marie Roper, giftedness is who you are, not what you do. And look at this definition or this conception of giftedness that Anna Marie Roper wrote back in the 80s, 1980s, that giftedness is a greater awareness, a greater sensitivity, and a greater ability to understand and transform perceptions into intellectual and emotional experiences. If you don't know Anna Marie's work, that's your homework from me. She is, I call her my gifted grandmother. She's no longer with us. She died about 10 years ago, but she started a school with her husband, George, for gifted kids in Michigan that still exists today. It started with 4 kids in the 1940s and is up to more than 700 kids, nursery school through 12th grade today. I think it's probably the best place in the country to be a gifted kid. The philosophy is amazingly child focused and progressive in its thoughts and in its actions. And it very much considers the gifted child, even if they are not achieving in the way that many of them do. So again, your homework, and you can find Anna Marie's work all over the place online, is introduce yourself to her work. And in doing so, you might introduce yourself to yourself, because a lot of Anna Marie's work was done on gifted adults. All right, so that's kind of my introduction. Sorry, it takes about half an hour to do that, but I hope it puts into perspective, at least my view of what giftedness is. I do believe our field has gone way overboard with looking at curriculum as the be all and end all of what giftedness is like. We no longer talk about gifted children. We talk about gifted curriculum, as I said earlier, and I just think that's wrong. We need to be in the field of psychology. Neurodiversity is definitely in the field of psychology. And the further we get removed from that, I think the less respect we give to the kids who we identify as gifted. This comes next. This is a book that I had, Judy Galbraith and I have written 4 versions of this Gifted Teen Survival Guide. Actually, the 5th one is coming out in a few months. And it's my 26th book, I think. But what's happened is when we talk to gifted teens about what it's like to be them, we want to hear from them as well. And so in all iterations of the book, all 4 versions that have come out, and the 5th one, as I said, is coming out, I think, in August, we've had thousands of teenagers and younger kids write to us and tell us what's important to them that we either need to focus on in the book or we did, and they appreciate that. And these is how we have drizzled them down, what we call the 8 great gripes of gifted kids. And I'm just going to have you read those for a second. I'm going to stop talking, take a sip of Diet Coke, and I'll be back to you in just a minute. So here's what I do with these 8 great gripes. And again, these come from letters and emails and conversations we've had with gifted kids over the decades. I give this to my own students, and I invite you, if you're a teacher, to do the same. And I teach, if you're a counselor, you can do it one-on-one. If you're a parent, you can do it with your kid or your kids. What I want them to do is circle any of them that impact them, that affect them, that are real for them, okay? And cross out any they don't care about. And so I've had kids who cross out all of them and say, I'm fine, just get off my back. And I've had others who circle virtually every one of them. Every one that they circle is, yeah, this sounds like me. On the back of the page, I asked them to just give a little explanation as to why they circled what they did. Over the years, the 3 that have come up most frequently that get circled are numbers 2, 3, and now 8. 8, probably not 10, 15 years ago, but with the advent of instant news via the internet, when you're 6 years old and something awful or beautiful happens in the world, you hear about it at the exact same time that the adults do. When I was growing up, that wasn't the case. If something awful or beautiful happened in the world, our parents and the adults in our lives were able to think about it before they chose whether or not to share that news with us. That ain't happening anymore. So number 8, especially with gifted kids, has become much more prominent over the past 10 years. So here's what I want to do is take you through as many of these as I can in hopes that you can see the 3 dimensions of giftedness or more that I see when I work with the kids as I do. This first one, again, is going to give you a piece of homework about no one explains what being smart or gifted is. It's kept a big mystery. A lot of kids will say, one of the kids said this was a 12-year-old. When I was tested for giftedness, I was told it meant I was special. What's that supposed to mean? Or this one, in 4th grade, I took a test to determine if I was gifted. 7 years later, I still don't know the qualifications. Why is it we identify kids as gifted or place them in gifted services, and then we really don't talk about what gifted is all about? So here's the way to do that. I give my kids this sheet that has gifted in the middle of the page, And then you see all these plus and minus signs. Now, the only word that they see when I give them the sheet is the word gifted. All the other areas are blank. But let me just read to you. These are from fifth graders, and then I want to share with you some ninth grade responses. Everything highlighted in yellow is where I'll go. So the first one on gifted, going up, this is Kenny and Tommy, two fifth grade boys, taught years ago. And they say people think higher of you when you're gifted. That plus means that's a good thing. A plus related to that is when you can help, it makes you feel better. But a negative about people thinking higher of you if they expect too much. If you go down, people tease you. That's a negative about being gifted. A negative about that, it makes you feel bad. A positive about getting teased is it makes you feel better that you're not teasing them. Whether they believe that or they just filled in the bubble, I'm not sure. All right, this one. This is from Stephanie. She's also a fifth grader, but she had skipped, of course. She had skipped third grade, so she was quite young. But here's what she wrote. It's, again, going to the negative here. She says, you might not have as good an imagination since you know things are or aren't true that other kids do. I love that. And negative about that, you might not believe stories that would be fun to believe. But a positive is you can still pretend you believe them and have fun. I called Stephanie socially ambidextrous because she would always talk with a kid she hadn't met before and start with a vocabulary that was very highfalutin. And if the kid was like, wow, what are you talking about? She would say, oh, and she'd move it down. So instead of saying Neanderthal, she'd say caveman. But if the kids understood Neanderthal, that's exactly where she stayed. She switched her vocabulary depending on the level of acceptability from her audience. And I asked her once why she did that. She looked at me like, well, duh, because she basically said the reason you talk with people is to communicate. And if they don't understand you, well, then just go to find a place where they do. She did this. She didn't do it grudgingly. She did it gracefully. And she was popular with just about everyone because she respected them and wanted to just know them as the people that they were. These are from my ninth graders. This is Lindsay. And Lindsay said, if you go over to the right, a negative about being gifted, people don't understand how you think, work, or react to things. A negative about that is you cannot convey emotions or expressions to people around you. But a positive is finding new ways to express yourself to people. And let's go down. It's a positive is being praised for being smart or more mature. That's a good thing. A negative, it creates complexes and unhealthy behavior. But a positive about being praised is the positive reactions increases your thinking that way. And this last one from Christian. Christian said a negative going to the left is self-isolation. A negative about that is you have a hard time expressing emotions. And a positive is you can shut off your emotions in a haunted house. Obviously, I did this around Halloween. A negative going on the other side is you have a hard time making friends. And a negative about that is embarrassing memories. But a positive about hard time making friends is you've learned how to talk to new people. And this last one going down, a positive is I don't have to study. Well, you didn't have to study in elementary or middle school. You already know the negative. I didn't learn how to study. But a positive is I had more fun. This is a powerful way to get kids to open up about what giftedness is, what it isn't, and how it manifests itself in positive and negative ways. It really is a powerful way to talk about a topic that a lot of kids just think we avoid, even though we shouldn't. So as a parent, as an educator, as a counselor, open up, talk about the field of gifted. They don't have to tell the kid their IQ number, but at least talk about what this thing means and how people disagree on what giftedness is, blah, blah, blah. Get their views, get their opinions, and then you can start a conversation that leads in many, many directions. The second one, which is the second great gripe, is school is too easy and not relevant. And that comes up again and again and again. I seldom heard about that in the school where I taught recently, but in virtually every other public school that I did interact with kids, at least there was some semblance of why are we doing this again? All right, here's what one kid said. School is difficult because of the quantity of work, not the quality. The material itself is simple, standard, and almost always lacks application. That's a 14-year-old. And a 13-year-old said this, school fits everyone except us gifted kids. I get bored in school nearly every day. I want to share with you some piece of writing that I've used for more than 30 years. And it's not from my own teaching career. Actually, it's from my wife's teaching career. She was a teacher of gifted kids when I met her. That's kind of how we connected. But she had a student who came in to her. She was a pull-out program teacher, working in grades, I think 4 through 6. And it was a new kid in the school, a fifth grader. And Robert's teacher, classroom teacher, came in and said, "Whoa, I've got a kid who's wicked smart. We're from New England. I got a kid who's wicked smart, and I'm not sure what to do with him because I gave him all the pre-tests to make sure that he didn't have to do work he already knew, and he blew the top off all of them." And so all three got together, the two teachers and this kid whose name is Robert, and they said, "What are we going to do? We don't want you doing work you already know, so let's find something else." So he decided, or they decided, that he would work on two projects while kids were doing like language arts work or math work that he already knew. And one of the things he wanted to do was study science as well as poetry. He loved them both. And so one of his many projects was doing a book of poetry about scientific terms and scientific concepts. And I want to share one with you that is my favorite. It's kind of the wrong time of year to share it, but nonetheless, if you close your eyes, you'll see what Robert sees. At the age of 11, he wrote this, and he called it Fall Leaves. I see a leaf that is yellow with red and orange mixed in. My mind says the yellow is caused by the oxidation of leftover sugars. The red and orange are caused by the emergence of recessive pigments. I see a leaf that is yellow with red and orange mixed in. My heart says the yellow is a bit of leftover sun from summer. The red and orange is the leaf, spiraling down the lowest spectrum as it is going to sleep. I see a leaf. Not bad for 11. Actually, not bad for 40, but he wrote this when he was 11. This is one of, 20 poems that he wrote instead of doing work he already knew. And talk about relevance. I'm going back to that first grader who said, "I never tried anything I can't do." I don't think Robert ever put words together in poetry that, in a poem, poetic form, that also dealt with scientific concepts. And again, each of the poems dealt with a different scientific concept. What I want your kids to do, again, whether it's at home or at school, is something that we often do for them. And maybe when they're young, we have to help. But as they get to be fifth grade, sixth grade above, they need to do something on their own, which I call self-advocacy. And Deb Douglas, one of my fine colleagues from Wisconsin, who was a middle school teacher of gifted for many, many years, 20 more years, wrote a book in 2018 called The Power of Self-Advocacy for Gifted Learners that I would highly recommend, because what she says is, I don't think there's a teacher on earth, well, maybe there's a few, there's not very many teachers who wake up in the morning and go, "Oh, goodness, I wonder how I can bore my students today." I wonder how I can make my brightest students feel worthless. We don't do that as teachers, or if we do, we shouldn't be teachers. But oftentimes, teachers aren't sure what to do with gifted kids because our gifted kids haven't given them any direction. Like with Robert, he told us he wanted to do poetry and science. Sometimes the kids need to be their own advocates. And Judy Galbraith and I, my co-author for the Survival Guide, put this together more years ago than I can count, and we still use it because it still works. It's called 10 Tips for Talking to Teachers. You'll find it online. It's pretty easy. Some kids have actually made YouTube videos about it. But if your son or daughter is like, "Oh, this is my brain is getting killed every time I walk into this class," if all they do is sit there and mope, nothing's going to change. If you go in and talk, you're taking away some of the power in a positive sense that your kids have, because they need to make an attempt, not maybe with you, but as they get older by themselves, to try to talk with a teacher on a professional level to get something that's more meaningful for them. So the first thing you do is, it says number here, and number one is make an appointment to talk. You don't just try to catch the teacher between periods or on a bathroom break. No, professionals don't do that. You make an appointment. The second thing you do, if there's other students who are inclined to feel the same way you do, maybe one or two others, you go in together, not as a team, as a gang, but basically to capitalize on each other's time and say, let's try to economize on this and just all meet as a group. Think through what you're going to say before you say it. If you go in there and stammer and go, yeah, well, kind of, that's not going to get you anywhere. Have an agenda and try to stick with it if you can. I won't go through each of these, but you get the point. What I'm trying to do is have kids take responsibility for their own education instead of just saying, "This sucks, I'm bored, blah, blah, blah." Do something about it. And if a kid comes home and says, "I'm bored," I probably look at him and say, "You're probably pretty boring to be around. What have you done to try to make it different?" Now, some teachers will never change. We know that. There are some teachers who say, "I've taught 30 years. I say, "No, you've taught the same year 30 times. However, many teachers will change. At least they'll be ready to listen. And if the kid goes in with an agenda that looks as focused as this, I bet they'll get listened to more than if they just went in going, I don't like what we do. I'm getting bored. No, sorry, that's not going to work. Have an agenda, have a plan. And if you don't, like number 10, if your meeting isn't successful, can you get help from another adult? If your point is still valid, don't stop with the first person. All right. I want these kids because again, I taught university level for 25 years. I taught college freshmen for about that length of time. I could count on one hand how many freshmen came up to me and said, I really don't think I need this course or this part of the course because I know it already. Can I show you that I do? They didn't do that. Maybe because they never learned to do it when they were younger. They need to learn to do it now. I love this from Art Costa, talking about what sometimes goes on in school. What was educationally significant and hard to measure has been replaced by what is educationally insignificant and easy to measure. So now we measure how well we taught something that isn't worth learning. He's a little caustic there, but I don't think he's far off base. And the next slide I want to share with you comes from a good friend and colleague of mine, Stephanie Tolan. And you may know her work. She's a best-selling author, a real strong advocate for profoundly gifted kids. She had some of her own as a mom. But she said something about what happens in some schools and in some areas where people think it's elitist. And right now, this is huge and gifted, that gifted programs are elitist. Or if you put kids in gifted classes, the kids who aren't in them are going to feel bad. They're going to feel sad. They're going to feel neglected and all this stuff. Stephanie has a one-liner. It's a zinger, but I think it's really powerful. And also it's true. She said this: you don't have the moral right to hold one child back to make another child feel better. Just think of the power of that, the word moral. You do not have the moral right to hold a child back to make another one feel better. When I taught kids with disabilities, nobody ever accused me of being elitist because I pulled certain kids from a class to work in a smaller group with me because they had special needs. Why is it that when we try to do that with kids who are gifted, we're called elitist? If that's the case, then every special thing we do is for any kind of kid in school should be called that. But I don't think any of it should be. All we're trying to do is match what the kids can do with what we have to offer educationally. All right, the third piece, I'm going to skip that one, is going to that gripe number 3. And the third gripe is on perfectionism. I'm going to go through this a little bit more quickly just because of time, and I want to leave time for questions. But again, so many gifted kids feel that getting a B is the end of the world. Or some of them would rather get an F or a D than a B, because at least if you get an F or a D, people around you are going, you could do better than that. And you agree with them. Yeah, good. But if you get a B and it's the best you could get, that can be devastating. So I love this cartoon. A D minus, a B plus, that proves that, man, we all have different thresholds of pain. We all do. And again, how many times did the kids I work with get out of their calculus class in 9th grade, come into my class in tears because they got a 94 instead of 100? This is what I asked the kids, and this is very powerful, I think. The first day I met with my 9th graders. Again, they didn't know my name. I didn't know theirs. We were strangers to each other. And so this is pretty in your face for somebody you've never met before. So I have the kids for the first day. I sit them down, introduce them myself a little bit, and I give them this list of 10 items. And I just say, I want you to read through these, and I'm going to ask you 2 favors. So I'm going to let you, for a second, my audience here, read through these. All right, so after the kids read them, I say, I need 2 things from you. The first thing I want you to do is close your eyes. And the second thing I want you to do is be honest. And then I'm going to read each one of these out loud. And if you're feeling this now, as you're starting in this new school, I want you to raise your hand. I'm not taking down names. I don't know your names. I'm just taking down numbers. I just want to know how many of you feel some of these things. And so I'll read number 1. Yeah, I will fail, so why should I even be going here? And a few hands might tentatively go up, and I say, way up, nobody's looking. And we do this for each of the 10 items. And I keep track of which ones get the most hands up. Year after year, class after class, the one that comes through the most with the most hands raised is number 8. I'm probably going to be the dumbest of the smart kids. Without exception, more than half of each class raises their hands, and usually 60, 70% of the kids. So I have them open their eyes and I say, okay, let's go through each one of these things. And this is the one that had the most hands raised, number 8. And they look, whoa, because more than half of them raise their hands. I say, you know what? It's statistically impossible for 60% of you to be the dumbest kid. One of you is the dumbest kid. And I try to make a joke. And they laugh too. But 60% of you cannot be the dumbest. Can we talk about this? And we just go through the items that are most circled or most hands raised and stuff. And it's a great way to get some of their anxiety, some of their fears, some of their hopes, and some of the commonalities out. So number 8 is always number 1 in terms of how many hands raised. Number 9 comes in oftentimes a close second, because a lot of times these kids, as I said, they got A's, but they never earned them. And then depending on the other, whatever grade it is, it goes on and on with, which ones gets most of the hands raised. But numbers 8 and 9 especially are the ones that do. So this talks to me again about the fear that I'm not good enough to be here, that I'm not smart enough to be here. So I give them some real world examples, like the greatest quarterbacks completing about 60% of their passes, or Major League Baseball players getting on base only 25% of the time. And if you get on 30% of the time, you're an all-star. And if you get on 40% of the time, you're Ted Williams. And very few baseball fans would see Ted Williams as a failure because he fanned out 6 times out of 10. Look at successful actors get turned down 29 out of 30 times when auditioning for television commercials. So you have all of these people who are successful at what they do, and yet they don't always cut it, so to speak. Same thing with authors. Look at all these: John Grisham, William Golding, Pearl Buck, J.K. Rowling, Jack Canfield, all of these people, authors everyone knows, or at least most of us know, and all of them had rejections at one time or another. The kids know that I write books, and they want to know 2 things. Do you ever get rejected, and how much money do you make? When they see my royalty statements, they go, that's all you make? I'm like, yeah, okay, that's another story. But so I've written 29 books. That's a lot. Yeah, 26 have gotten published and 3 have been rejected more than 50 times. I had 1 book rejected so far 35 times. You want to see the rejection letters? Yeah. So I pass them out and the kids go, dude, this guy hated your book. Listen to what he said. But I still get royalties for the books that didn't get rejected. That's what we need to share as parents, as teachers, as counselors, not only saying it's okay not to be perfect, but to show on our own lives when we weren't and it still worked out, that we still love doing what we do, even though it doesn't always pan out. All right, those are the things that we really need to say. I'm going to skip to this one because if you went to college, we learned about this in Psychology 101. And we forgot about it promptly. Instead of saying stuff on the left, where you're the know-it-all, I told you so, say stuff on the right. Let's see what you can learn from this. Look at number 3. If you say to a kid, it's not the end of the world to get a B, I can hear the young lady saying to herself, yeah, you don't know my dad. But if you say what's on the right, it sounds like you're upset with your grade. That same young lady might say out loud to you, yeah, you don't know my dad. The stuff on the right allows the conversation to grow. The stuff on the left stifles it. Our first gut knee-jerk reaction is often the stuff on the left. We need to defer and look at the things on the right, where we basically acknowledge what the kid has said is real, it's legitimate, and where can we go from here? Okay? Because as Mark Twain said, I have had many catastrophes in my life, some of which have actually happened. Sorry, going to skip a few of those. I can't skip over Anna Marie, though. It just would be sacrilegious on my part. This is one thing she said way back when someone asked her a question about what's the greatest gift we can ever give to our gifted children. And listen to what she wrote, or said. This was at a conference, that the gifted child is average with gifts, not superior with faults. So average with gifts means you could be the smartest kid in your school or in your class, but you still don't want to eat lunch alone unless it's your choice. You don't want to be picked last for the kickball team. It still hurts. That's average with gifts. Superior with faults is the kid who comes home with 5 A's and 2 B's. B's? You think MIT likes B's? So you know what I'm saying? If Anna Marie says we need to look at it from this perspective of average with gifts rather than superior with faults, I'll follow her lead. Next is about socialization. And the 2 great gripes that dealt with this were friends who really understand me, a few and far between, And the fifth grade gripers, I get teased about being smart. So I'm going to combine those two. And I just love this wisdom from Doctor Who of 900 years of time and space. And I've never met anyone who wasn't important. I just love that quote. It's so powerful. Uh, I don't have any slides to share with you on this, but I do want to share with you a story, a couple stories. When I had kids who said, yeah, this was one concern to me when they circled the eighth grade gripes, here's what a 12-year-old said. I said, I only have a few friends at home. My closest friend is my next door neighbor. He's known me for 3 years. For the first year, we struggled to communicate. Recently, though, I've been able to talk more deeply to him as my having to dumb down my vocabulary actually inspired him to expand his own. Or this one, I was homeschooled the past 2 years, but I competed in the local middle school academic team. It was quite awkward going against the crowd, an outsider trying to break in. And then this one, I do a online seminar with the Davidson Institute for Talent Development with a group called the Young Ambassadors. And I'll talk more about them in a little bit. But here's what one young person said a couple of years back when I asked about this peer issue. He said, I never thought about the exhale and a comfort level of the aspect of a peer group. Now that I think about it, it is really important if you want to be contented where you are. I have found that there is a world of difference between being around friends that get you versus people who don't. When people don't get you, communicating becomes stressful and exhausting, and you are constantly reviewing your statements. It's a bit like editing an essay while you're writing it. The end result is that you feel completely exhausted when you are done. If you are with a group of peers that you connect with, the burden is taken off of communicating, and it becomes an invigorating experience. After such an interaction, you feel energized, and together you can solve any problems. That to me is so powerful. And it speaks to me as the most important part of getting gifted kids together. It has very little to do with academics and everything else to do with finding a place you can exhale. When gifted kids get together with each other, the sense of humor, the lack of drama compared to what typical middle school would have, and just the connections they make, they can use vocabulary that's big and nobody cares. Or if you don't understand, you say, what's that word mean? But not in an accusatory or insulting way. Gifted kids, when they find one another of their same age, they just go, whoa. And if you have a gifted kid who does not have a peer group of their same age, my guess is they try to find it elsewhere with adults, with older kids, even with younger kids who just think it's so cool that they know so much. What I'm trying to say is that the biggest benefit of getting gifted kids together has a lot more to do with socialization than it does have to do with academics. The next one goes to item number 6, which is a great gripe number 6 about having too many things in the world to do, too many things you want to be when you grow up, so to speak. And I just love what John Lennon said about this way, way back when. He said, when I was 5 years old, my mother always told me that happiness was the key to life. When I went to school, they asked me what I wanted to be when I grew up. I wrote down happy. They told me I didn't understand the assignment, and I told them they didn't understand life. I just love that quote. When it comes to career planning for gifted kids, it is not an easy job, not an easy task. What if they don't want to be a doctor, a lawyer, engineer? If they do, great. But what if they don't? What if they want to become a poet or a carpenter or who knows what? I'm not sure. Oftentimes we think, well, you don't want to waste your talents by becoming something that doesn't respect your intellectual depth and height. Yet at the same time, do I want to become something just because I'm smart, even though it doesn't feed my soul? Okay, so that's really the biggest issue to contend with when it comes to what I call and what others have called multi-potential. You have so many potentials in so many different areas that you choose one college major, one route to go down is very difficult for a lot of kids. This is what some of my kids said. My mom said, oh, let's go to this one. I've considered so many jobs, it isn't even funny. I made a list of things I don't want to be because it is shorter than the list of things I do want to be. And then this one, I love this one. My mom said I can be anything I want as soon as I become a doctor. A little bit of pressure there. And this girl, Liza, at the age of 11, kind of put it all in perspective. I can recite 85 digits of pi. I'm creative and artistic, but also scientific. This makes it hard to decide who I want to be, seeing as both the two sides of me conflict. I hope I can't, but if I hope I can be both, but if I can't, I don't know which side to pick. The best advice I can give is to follow Thomas Friedman's advice, the Pulitzer Prize winning economist who said this. He gave this at a commencement address at university. Whatever you plan to do next year, whether you plan to travel the world, go to grad school, join the workforce, or take some time off to think, don't just listen to your head, listen to your heart. It's the best career counselor there is. Do what you really love to do. And if you don't quite know what that is yet, well, keep searching. Because if you find it, you'll bring that something extra to your work that will help ensure you will not be automated or outsourced. It'll help make you an untouchable radiologist, an untouchable engineer, or an untouchable teacher. One of the best ways to find out what you do and do not want to be is to follow people who are doing what they love, whether that's a carpenter, a songwriter, a doctor, a veterinarian, a seamstress. I don't care what it is. Just if your kids are interested in it, find other people who love what they do at that field and go with it. Again, as a college professor who taught freshmen, the majority of freshmen came in with a major, and by the time they graduated, up to 80% of them had changed that major at least once. Fine. I wish students had to come to college with a major called IDN. I don't know. IDK, sorry. Because most of them don't. Maybe they're told from the time they're little, you can become anything you want. So of course you'll become a fill in the blank. And then they get away to college. They go someplace different, or they don't go to college at all. And they go, now what? That now what should be filled with what feeds their soul, not just feeds their mouths. Okay. I was told when I was growing up, when I knew I wanted to be a teacher at age 6, that I shouldn't be a teacher. Why? Because there's no money in it. Boys aren't teachers. And thirdly, you're too smart to be a teacher. That's the career guidance I got from my high school counselors. And to this day, it bothers me that at this very nice private high school for boys, I was told I couldn't be what I loved because it just didn't fit some stereotype of what gifted young men should become. All right, I'm going to stop there. Number 7 and 8 are about trying to not fit in, but you see things in a different creative way than others don't. Again, getting together with other kids like you is one powerful way to understand that you're not alone. And also number 8, which is about all the problems in the world that you see that other kids your age either don't see or don't care about. One of my favorite organizations is, in addition to saying, is the Davidson Institute for Talent Development. And they have a program that I've been proudly associated with for more than a decade called the Young Ambassadors Program. And what that does is the Young Ambassadors are kids who are gifted, who just have something they want to do to advance the world from their point of view. And rather than share it with you on a slide, I'm just going to read you some of last year's ambassadors projects. Alex is 13, lives in Washington, D.C., and he put together a program where high ability math students tutor kids in Title I schools in Washington, D.C. A 15-year-old girl put together the Smoky Mountain Computer Science Girls, which is a computer science camp, if you will, for middle schools in Appalachia. Caroline, age 15, did The World Is Us, where elementary students are introduced to world cultures in order to increase understanding of cultures different than their own. And 17-year-old Dylan learning philosophy through debate, where teens learn how to think critically and discuss modern ideas using philosophical topics. This is just one of many programs where kids are able to take something of interest to them and of benefit to the world and to just move in a direction to make things better. I hope you can see that I love talking about this stuff and that it has been my 42-year affiliation with gifted kids and those who care about them that has brought me to this point today. And I'm hoping that this gave some insight into the social and emotional needs of gifted kids, whether neurodiverse or not. And thank you for being a part of this whole series of sessions that go on for 3 days. And Mike and Julie Postma, congrats to you for making this all happen. All right, so I'm ready for any questions and comments that you might have.
Hey, Jim, do you have a contact thing you can throw in the chat?
Yeah, I can go back to my first slide, or I can just tell you my email. Either one?
Yep, or if you can put it in the chat, but I'll type it.
Sure. Okay, I can do that. Yeah, let me just go find where it is. I'm sorry.
No issues.
No. Where's the chat over here?
Actually, just tell me and I'll put it in.
Yeah, I'm trying to find it here. It is jim.delisle at Yahoo.
All right. Nope, I did it to host and panelists. I need to do that to everyone.
There, I can put it in here if you need.
Okay.
Not capital, but yeah, that's good.
Oops. Come on, learn to type. Okay, folks, there is Jim's contact information. Thanks, Jim, once again. And folks, if you have questions, you can use the Q&A or the chat box. And Kristen says, thanks for the great information. And we'll use our wait time, as awkward as that can be.
That's fine.
Any questions, folks? Lynn Lim, thank you. Lynn spoke, Lynn spoke yesterday. So. Will all the slides be available with the recordings? That is up to the presenters to send their slides to us. Most of them will. And if Jim, if you could send them via PDF, that would be great. Do you have any recommendations on how to find a social group for a child online or otherwise?
Online, I'm not sure. I haven't done much of that, to be honest. But what are the groups that, it depends where you're from. If you're from a larger metropolitan area, or if you have, gifted support groups for parents, oftentimes that's one of the best sources. You may want to connect. Virtually every state does have a state association for gifted and talented, and a lot of them will have local affiliations that you may not know about. That may be a place to start. If your kid goes to a school where there is a gifted program, or if your kid isn't even in that school, connecting with the gifted coordinator and just trying to find a way to maybe connect kids in that way is where I'd go. Online, I honestly can't give you much information about that. I'm sure there are ways to do it, and Mike might be much more savvy on that than I am.
Yeah, Marla, we've talked about this, and we're dealing here with a highly profoundly gifted young lady, and there's some other things going on. But if you check online, I think the best way to go is to go with interests, go with passions, and find those. I know, doesn't Davidson have some online things going on?
David, if you're part of the Davidson, if your child is a young scholar, and well, first of all, if you don't know about the Davidson Institute for Talent Development,
Get out first.
Yeah, do that first. It's ditd.org. I want to put that in, Mike. They were a group founded in 1999 by Bob and Jan Davidson, because when they were looking to be philanthropists for a group that had not been served well educationally, they said, and they found after their study that, in their investigation, that it was highly gifted kids and profoundly gifted kids who were the least served in our public schools. So they developed the Davidson Institute for Talent Development back in 1999. It started out with, I think, 40 families. And I remember working with them up in Michigan. I worked with the kids and, the parents. And the kids at the time, the kids were ages 4 to 10 years old. The group now has over 2,000 parents involved. The kids are ages 4 through 18. And the Young Scholars Program is the one that is their premier program from my perspective. And that's the one that has over 2,000 parents. Every year they get together. With COVID, they've done it virtually, but prior to then, the kids would get together once a year for a weekend at the University of Nevada, Reno, which is where the Davidson School is. It's called the Davidson Academy, which was just ranked as the best public high school in America. And it's only been in existence maybe 10, 15 years. So they are doing things right educationally, academically, but they also have at the heart of what they do the benefits socially and emotionally, not only for the kids who they serve, but for the parents as well. And they have an online database that is par excellence. You could just type in any descriptors at all, and you can download free information written by folks like Anna Marie Roper, anyone you can name and gifted who has a reputation, and those who maybe just parents who are writing to say, hey, I've got some good information to share. There are hundreds, if not thousands, of articles in their database that you can download and just learn more about the kid you have in your home or your school.
And I would check on other places like Bright and Quirky and Tilt Parenting that have different programs. I'm not familiar with all of them, but they may have some stuff as well. So what is it, DITT.org?
DIT, there's a lot of them, but DITD.org. But I think you have it on there too, the Davidson.
Yeah.
DITD, sorry.
Oh, someone already stuck it on there.
Oh, DIT. It's DITD, not DITT.
Oh, so
Yeah.
take that last T and make it a D.
Yeah.
So what do you do about a kid who's used to being good at everything, but doesn't want to try something new for fear of failure?
Yeah, wow, that is so common. The best person to help that kid understand why they could probably go forward without totally failing is another kid who's slightly older who had that happen themselves. When I worked with my ninth graders, I would sometimes have my 11th graders come in after the first quiz that the kids took together, where the ranks were from, I mean, if you're ninth grade and you're taking calculus, very few kids got 100 on their first quiz. So they'd be coming in with 70s, 80s, they'd be in tears, they'd be apoplectic about, I'm too dumb for the school and stuff. Then I'd have a junior come in and the junior would say, you know, been there, done that. We can talk a good game as adults, or yeah, it's okay to try. It's, you know, if you don't, you're not gonna succeed if you never try. We say all these platitudes, they don't work. What you do is you get a kid just a couple of years older who, as you know, has a whole lot more credibility than you do as an adult. And you just say, can you talk to my daughter? Can you talk to my son? Try to put their head in a different place. My guarantee is that will work better than our trying to sit down with them and have a nice chat about the importance of making a mistake. You can point out some of the things I did with people who have succeeded even though they haven't been perfect at what they did, or they didn't work the first time around. I mean, you have everyone from, you know, Lady Gaga, who had her first record contract taken out from under her feet because they didn't like her on the second review of her voice. I mean, you have all of these examples who kids will know in sports and media and all that. But I think the best people to teach them is somebody who has been there a couple of years before they did and was like, you know what, I survived. It sucks. You get better. The first B is awful. The second B is less awful. The third B is like, whatever. You know, that's the point you have to get. But the best person who can get them there is another kid who's experienced it personally.
I think Wayne Gretzky said it. I scored something like 100% of 100% of the shots I didn't take.
Yeah, yep, that's exactly right. You would know that because you're Canadian and you're a hockey guy.
Yes, and I still am. All right, some compliments. DITD.org.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we still need to change that.
Yes, I can't change it now.
Corrected.
So Katie, that's DITD.org.
Yeah.
Is there a central website for learning about city schools with strong gifted and talent programs? I actually don't think there is, in terms of a complex directory of gifted schools.
Yeah.
I know there's some 2E ones.
The reason it isn't is it changes so rapidly. I mean, what was a great gifted program school in one town for 10 years, you go back 10 years later, it may not be, just because of a change in policy, a change in personnel, a change in philosophy. So as Mike said, it's really hard to have a directory because it is in flux. It's not like with special ed for kids with disabilities, schools are required to offer program services and they get sued if they don't. That's not true with gifted. And so it's at the whim of the superintendent, the gifted coordinators, whoever. So it's really hard to put it together. But if you have a district where when you call up and they say, well, we don't have a gifted coordinator, they probably have someone who's supposed to be serving that role. It might be a director of curriculum. It could be an assistant superintendent for curriculum, whatever. You may not even have to ask, do you have a gifted program? If they say no, then you might say, what services do you offer for kids whose abilities exceed grade level, or something along those lines. So you don't need to have a gifted program in order to have a kids well served in a school. And some of the best services for gifted kids probably aren't even called that. It could be honors classes, it could be extracurriculars that are academically focused or more enhancing for kids with special interests and talents. So don't take the word that, oh, we don't offer gifted programs. Well, then what do they do for kids who excel in one way or another? They certainly do it in sports. They often do it in music. So why don't they do it in academics? What do they offer? That's another question to ask.
And I would ask about advanced learning programs
Yes.
if
Yeah.
they have. And just for folks, information on our website, giftandthriving.com. I have an article called The Holy Grail, and it's a guide for parents to go into a school and ask about gifted programming and what questions to ask, what to look for, that kind of stuff, if you're interested. Carol Raymond's says that 2 of your books were used in the course that led me into gifted education. And Carol is actually going to be speaking next.
Cool.
So
Thanks
identification, thoughts on identification. All right, we're opening up a can of worms.
Yeah, I go a lot of ways on this because a lot of times with young kids, we don't have to identify them because they identify themselves. And you know this if you're a parent. When you compare what your child does at age 2 or 3 or 4 years old, before they get into formal schooling, with other kids in the neighborhood who are doing that, if your child excels, and you can tell, even the other parents will go, well, my kid doesn't do that. Even though that's not a formal identification, it certainly is an indicator that these are the things that and if it's your first child or only child, you might think all kids, start reading at age 3. Well, actually, no, they don't. And so keep track of all these milestones along the way, document them. So when it does come time to start school, you will have at least some evidence that, and whether it's recordings, whether it's writings your kid's done, anything like that, keep those. Those are important, especially for identification of young gifted kids. It really varies, and of all the things we do in gifted, I think identification is the messiest. And we seem to know what to do with kids once we find them, but we're always afraid not of over-identifying, but of missing kids. And that's becoming especially true now with Black and brown kids who have been underrepresented for as long as I've been in this field, and probably longer, because we're just looking at points along the way that are number-based, only test scores, instead of maybe what community leaders value and see in kids of color or kids from a different culture than the mainstream culture, if you will. And finding out from those people, who are the ones who excel? Who are the ones in your own community who you see are just leaders in one way or other, or just leading in a way that we may not measure in school, but it doesn't mean it's not important to measure. The one thing I have about identifying young gifted children, I go both ways on that, because I know it's important to do that. Yet at the same time, there's a fear that the kids who get identified, say in 1st, 2nd, 3rd grade, and this is happening, this is one of the concerns in the New York City public schools right now, which you may know has gone under tremendous pressure to get rid of gifted programming. It's because of parents of high incomes are able to bring their kids to places and buy materials and work with their kids in ways that when they take that initial test as a 4-year-old in the New York schools, the kids excel. Is it giftedness or is it privilege? And I think that's the big issue right now with young giftedness, that we're afraid to do it because maybe all we're identifying is kids who have had more advantages than others, where if other kids who didn't have those advantages, in a sense, had them, I wonder how many more we'd identify. So the identification piece is very messy, as Mike alluded to, and it's one that I'm not sure what the solution is, but so many times with gifted kids, they identify themselves just by their behaviors, by their reactions, by their vocabularies, and just by the way they handle their emotion.
The big question faced in our country is, are we identifying for achievement, or are we identifying truly for those that actually need it from an intellectual perspective?
That's it, yeah.
And I'll tell you a very, very quick story in the time we have left here. Probably 15 years, 12, 15 years ago, I had a kindergarten teacher ask me, he says, I'm not sure what to do with this young child. He came in, he was a migrant worker's son, came in, was only there for a few months, gone, came back a few months, very little exposure to anything, even books. And he says, but he's performing at an average level. But when I came in, he was performing at the lowest level. I said, what do you expect? He had no exposure. Right. By the end of the year, that child had exceeded all the curriculum in that class and well beyond. I said, does that not tell you something? Mm-hmm. And I said, that's the folks that you're going to start recommending for identification and assessment, right? because you can see how they grasped onto the material, whereas all his classmates were, and this was a pretty high-end district, had all those unique advantages well before. And so you can always, the biggest thing about gifted kids, 2E kids especially, if you get to know them, that's
Let me give two other resources for you. One of them, I'm on a board of directors for a group called the Institute for Educational Advancement, which is based in Pasadena, California. And they have a program called the Carolyn D. Bradley Scholarship, which over the years has selected, I think we're up to several hundred kids now. They apply in 7th grade, they get selected in 8th, and then we will basically send them where they need to go for high school, whether it's their own school or a private school, and we will pay the tuition. It's an amazing program, both for what it does for the kids individually and what it does when we bring these kids together annually for a conference with each other. So take a look at the Carolyn D. Bradley Scholarship. We're always looking, especially for kids from rural areas. We get a lot of urban areas, people who know about this program, but for those who don't, and it's just a marvelous way to identify and then serve gifted kids who are highly academic, as well as in other ways, highly intellectual. And the other is the Jack Kent Cook Scholarship. This is for kids, especially from low and middle income areas, and they've served thousands of kids over the years. Jack Kent Cook was quite a character. He owned the Washington Redskins when they were called that, and a number of other things from Toronto, Mike. And he started out basically as a salesman, did door-to-door salesman as an 11-year-old, and became this incredibly wealthy man who decided he wanted to help kids like him. And he didn't go, I believe, was beyond 8th grade in his education. And they have served thousands of kids, and they now go into the college and graduate school levels as well. So if you don't know of the Jack Kent Cook Scholarship Program, look that one up. It's based here in Virginia, and they just do amazing work. And I don't usually tout my own work, but the book that's coming out in August, that 5th edition of the Gifted Teen Survival Guide, has 20 or so essays written by gifted teenagers and some gifted adults about some of the struggles they had in getting identified, getting served, getting, there's one from an adult named Jaime Castellano, who is a professor in Florida, who was raised in the poorest part of Chicago, and now has a PhD, and first to go to college, but he had many struggles along the way, and he writes about that. But there's also teenagers who write incredibly powerful essays about what it's like to somehow be either misunderstood or just bypassed, and then coming into their own as they got a little bit older. So that's coming out, I think, in August from Free Spirit Publishing.
All right, we got to wrap it up. Make room for Carol. It should be, she was here and now she disappeared, but at any rate. So thank you so much, Jim.
Sure thing, Mike.
And Catherine, I saw you had one more question about identifying neurodivergent kids, and send me an email and we can have a discussion about that, because that's another long discussion. So anyways, thanks so much, Jim. And thanks everyone for attending. And I'm going to have you log off so I can get Carol in here.
Sounds good. Thanks again, everybody.
See you, bud.
Bye.
What? Yeah, what's going on? Why not? Hey, Carol.
Hello. Hopefully that works.
Yeah, you're good.
All right. I have no idea why. Oh, my camera changed. I have no idea why I couldn't open Zoom. You know, those weird things happen.
Yep. Your voice seems a little kind of gravelly. Is that your mic or?
Hold on. Let me make sure that it's using the right microphone.
Okay.
Is that better?
No, seems to be the same. Is your internet Stable?
It should be. I can try logging in direct. I can try hardwiring.
Or try logging on, off, and then on again. Sometimes
I can do that.
we still got 5 minutes, so.